Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the football experience. Caleb is back with me, so I'm the common denominator, except for one episode. If you go back to, I don't know, episode 20,
Oh
30,
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Mutty and I did an in-person one. That's all right.
Yeah, and this was before we had cameras set up, so this was like back in
Yeah.
the dark ages. Um, I was just telling Caleb how, because he obviously wasn't on the pod, he listens to what me and Matti talked about, so he can make some references and correct us on anything we might have said
No, no,
incorrectly.
no, nothing like that.
No,
There was
nothing.
nothing to correct.
Anything that you might have disagreed on?
I didn't like my characterization as negative. I took a little bit of umbrage with that. I'm
the
feeling a little bit more positive after the weekend as well. No, no,
the
I get your point.
realist Liverpool fan, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I would have preferred maybe realist than negative.
Well, yeah,
No,
but
I'm just.
the thing is, like, when we contrast you and Matti, I guess like Matti's the more positive one, you're the more negative slash realist one.
Well, I thought that was particularly shown with the. I think Marty and I have the same viewpoint on Kai Havertz, and I guess we'll talk about him a little bit later. But
Yeah, we can get into it.
when he gave a little bit of a Kai Havertz defense about always being played out of position, I thought that was good balance,
Mm.
because I don't think I would have given him that defense because I'm a little bit, as you say, more negative on Kai Havertz. So Marty portrayed something, but the pod definitely got me in the mood to watch the first game that I guess we're going to talk about briefly
Yeah,
soon.
but before we get into that, I was just
Yeah.
telling to all our listeners, I was just telling Caleb how so I fix myself a drink usually. It's sometimes water, it's sometimes like a little syrup mix. This is elderberry, if anyone wondering. And about 5 minutes into the pod with Mati, I was like reaching over with I think with my left hand or something, or maybe even my right hand, whatever it was, and I like my finger somehow got caught in the glass like this, and I like knocked it over. So I did like 40 minutes of the 45 of the pod with like this sticky elderberry syrup on the table. I was trying to watch where I was putting my elbows and stuff like that in my hands. And yeah, like never the true professional worked through
Work through it. I didn't
syrup.
hear anything because I mostly listened, so I didn't hear anything that suggested something might have gone wrong in that moment. So I'm going to have to go back and watch to see
Yeah.
if I can pinpoint the moment when Nev spills his elderberry.
Well, I was just like wondering, like, oh man, do I like stop it? Like we're already like
Yeah.
starting to get into the conversation and starting to get
And
deep.
Mutty's outside enjoying the sun,
Yeah,
and I'm like,
exactly.
what if the weather turns?
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm
Yeah.
here struggling with a bloody wet sticky table.
Hey, but you still went whatever, like 17, 18 minutes over what you thought you'd go over anyway, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
didn't affect you much at all.
We did promise a shorter pod, but like for all our listeners, what we will do, like we're gonna basically upload the whole pod, and then we'll clip out the sections. So people that want to listen to the whole thing continuously, they can. People that want to listen to the 15, 20 minute segments of each topic that we talk about, they can listen to that. But let's get us started on the biggest game of the weekend. Arsenal versus Man United. I'll let you kick that one off since you didn't join us on the last
Oh,
pod.
let me kick it off. All right. Well, firstly, I thought you guys previewed it really well, and I think the thing I'd say is it got me really excited to watch the game. So I did watch the game. No headphones on or anything. I'll actually listen to the commentary. Kind of wish I hadn't because I think it's Conor McNamara, the Irishman. I don't like his commentary very much. I wish we had some Drury or someone like that at that moment. But anyway, did have Andy Townsend in the passenger seat. He's always all right. And I thought it was. I thought your preview was probably better than the match in terms of building up the excitement because the match itself, I wouldn't say it was terrible. It definitely wasn't that, but it wasn't great. And I think that's partly credit to United, and it's partly Arsenal not playing the same style of football because I know you guys had the discussion about how they're playing this season. But at the end of the day, doesn't really matter when you can take 10 points from a possible 12 to start the season. And I wouldn't agree with Arteta saying it was domination in this game. I get how he comes to that conclusion, but I think the way United set up, like it wasn't Arsenal domination. It wasn't incision. It wasn't putting them under real pressure all the time. It was just sort of having territory, keeping possession. But I think maybe they're more swashbuckling last season, but maybe they get hit on the counter more last season. So again, when I grade Arsenal after this game, I think I still sit in the same place because it wasn't a convincing win, while it was a good win, and it's good for momentum, and it's good for the narrative that now we can go forward and say, well, look at what they're doing when they're not playing particularly well. I think Gary Neville brought that up in the post match on Sky Sports. So I'm still not unsure on Arsenal. I'm sure they're a good team. I'm sure they have really good players pretty much in every position. I am quite sure of that. But am I sure that they're better than last season? That I'm still unsure of. But I don't think it matters when you can win this game because this is a big game. United are defensively good enough to go away to grounds and make it tough, although their away record is terrible. And to the point, I think if this game was played at Old Trafford, we might have seen something a little bit different because United are so poor on the road. But I agree with Ten Hag that they looked more compact. But I guess we'll dissect United. But all in all, I think both teams can be reasonably happy with what happened out on the pitch. The game could have been a bit of better spectacle, but yeah, I'm more interested in your feeling as an Arsenal fan, just post match, what happened in the match.
Well, it's interesting, like the approaches of the both teams, because I watched AFTV's tactical breakdown of the game, and they mentioned something that I mentioned in the 3-2 win from January at the Emirates, where and I noticed in this game as well where Arsenal were more than happy for like Onana, Lindelof, Martinez to like play those triangles amongst themselves. And it was what I mentioned back then where here, United, have the ball, have it in your defensive half. We don't care. We'll sit back, try to break us down because you haven't developed those patterns of play yet. And in the tactical breakdown video that I watched, they showed, I think like United had like 280 passes, something like that. I think like 90% of those passes were in their own half. There was like...
It looked that way.
There was like 20 or 30 passes that actually made it into their attacking half. And I think it was only like 4 passes inside the box. So there was like that many entries into the box. So like
did all right with one of them, pretty much the first one.
Yeah, which was cancelled out like a minute later. But this might be Arteta's tactic against United, where it's like have the ball, because like I think like the first half possession, I think United had like almost 55% if I'm not mistaken, and then then like overall in the game it was Arsenal 51% or 52%. So it's, whereas you don't really, like going off of last year to this year, you don't really think that Arsenal would be happy to have that kind of possession. You think that they're going more down the City path where it's like 60%, 65%. And as I was watching the game as well, I was frustrated a little bit because, see, I'm more frustrated, I guess, with not necessarily with Arsenal, because I can see that this is like their approach to the game, but it's more with United. It's like they're a frustrating team to watch because not just because they've spent so much on the team, but like they have some really good players in that team, but they still play really bad football to watch, but they can still manage to stay in games. So it's frustrating because like it just pisses you off that with that amount of good players that they're playing such negative football, but they're still getting results. Whereas like for instance with Tottenham last year, it was like that at the start, but then as the season went on, they still continued playing terrible football, but the results stopped coming. So yeah, like they're a really weird team to that. they're not a team that you can get behind, that you can watch as, for instance, a neutral. Whereas, like, for instance, I mentioned in the last two pods, I'm actually enjoying the way Tottenham play, and like, yeah, and that's coming from an Arsenal fan. Like, Tottenham, especially compared to last year, like, I don't mind watching a Tottenham game. Whereas, like, I would not waste 90 minutes of my life watching a Tottenham game last year, because one, it's Tottenham, and two, like, it's absolutely horrible to watch. And now, like, I'm getting the same feeling with United.
Yeah, yeah, I can somewhat see that. I mean, this isn't the game to judge United in terms of that. I think going away to Arsenal and
but come on,
with,
these first four games, they've pretty much been. This has probably been their best game, and I'd say that it wasn't necessarily because
it was definitely their best game.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it was because of their choices. I'd say it's more because of Arsenal's choices, the way they decided to play.
Yeah. So when you're talking about your frustration with United, I get that. I'm more frustrated that they play that way, and they should play that way, because I think defensively that is their strength. And counter-attacking, look, I want to dispel this notion that Manchester United shouldn't be a counter-attacking team. They should be a counter-attacking team. Manchester United were at their best under Ferguson when they won those 3 titles in a row as a counter-attacking team. It's not bad football to play counter-attacking football. So where my frustration comes in with Manchester United is that they're a team who play like that, or whose strengths are that, but they're trying to masquerade as something different, something that plays out from the back, something that plays all these passes. And to your point, the passes were all between the defenders in those first however long it was. There was just... And I can understand some benefits of ball retention in terms of makes the players feel like they're trying to play football. Although whenever it came time to deliver a ball into the next line, it was just horrendous. But it gives you a bit of a rest. You can't play the whole game without the ball. But why, for me, when I look at tactics, particularly under Mourinho, and this is like vintage Mourinho. This is Mourinho at his best when he had his Chelsea, his Inter, and even that United team he did kind of well with. Why, maybe not every time, but why sometimes? Why can't they just say to Wan-Bissaka, you go all the way forward, we'll adjust our shape around that, we'll compact around you, we'll pin you up on Zinchenko, and then we'll just play a long goal kick or a long offside, and we'll just play around that, and we'll compact the whole pitch there, and we'll just play to there. I don't think that's bad to watch. In fact, I remember Real Madrid in that 13-14 season where they won the Champions League. They were some of the best exponents of doing that, of going long and setting up their shape around a long ball. And honestly, like, it gives you a chance for that 50-50 ball if you're quicker in the transition. And because Man United are a counter-attacking team, they are quick in the transition. If you can win that second ball and you can play off that, you can find openings, and you can play far more exciting football than what we're watching with this playing out from the back. It's bullshit, really. It is. If you don't know how to do it, why the fuck are you doing it? So I'm not saying maybe every time, maybe they want the ball sometimes, but especially with a target like Zinchenko there, why can't we just pin someone more physical against him, play it long to him, and then we'll try and feed off second balls? I don't like the masquerading. So that's where my frustration comes in with United. But to Ten Hag's point, they were solid. And another but, why are we here again? Why are we having to talk about them as if they have to build from the very start again? Why are they starting all over again after a whole season's of work last season under him? And, well, comically, going forward, to your point about them maybe regressing like Tottenham did, if it's Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans playing, if Lissandro Martinez and Varane are a bit injury prone this season, yeah, they are going to regress pretty quickly. It can't be those. It was bad enough that Dalot's already at left back. So, man. But on the bright side, I think Højlund looked pretty good when he came on.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit scared. Like, once I saw him like pretty much muscling off Gabriel like 2 or 3 times.
Budget Haaland.
Yeah, well, I was like, I'm like, okay, he can it looks like he can play in the Premier League against like bigger defenders. And if they can start utilizing his strength like that as like a hold-up striker to bring in the players around him, then this could be something. And like
Do you reckon he looks good as a counter-attacking forward as well? They're almost doubling down.
not in the sense that if he's the first pass that you find, and then he's the interconnecting pass to like a Rashford or a Martial or an Anthony, then yeah, he can definitely be like if he's the outball, because you're like, okay, he's definitely going to be able to hold it up.
But Bruno could also be the outball and he could be making the run, so it just plays into that strength a little bit more. It's like they've added to the strength that they have, but it's like Ten Hag's so reluctant to use the strength. Just use the strength.
See, the thing is, you mentioned...
Well, he wasn't in this game. It was his plan. I'm sorry. I just needed to say. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Fergie, and like, you know, we've... Now that like a lot of his team has retired, like I've heard like Scholes, Neville, Giggs, like all those players say, like Fergie always used to say, when you receive the ball, the first pass you should be looking for is forward. So it wasn't necessarily like a counter-attacking team where it's like put 10 men behind the ball, pump it long, and you know, it's just like, okay, wherever we receive the ball, try to look for the first pass to be forward. It's similar to, I guess, the way Liverpool play under Klopp, where it's like but obviously there's adjustments in the press and all that stuff, but it's like when we receive the ball, let's play forward. Whereas now, like with Ten Hag, it's like, yeah, like when we receive the ball, let's try and keep possession, build it up, get like 10 passes, and then go forward. So you guys aren't accustomed to that. You guys don't have that in you. Like, in a way, maybe he's trying to build towards that, but the personnel that he has is just, it doesn't seem right for that. Yeah, I
agree. It could be a little bit of Arsenal's tactics, like you say, with Arteta choosing to play maybe a little bit more withdrawn to ask those questions of United, and then obviously then that's the trap, and that's what they've been forced into, and then we see the results of it. Like you say, like we say, they're not very good at it. Yeah, man. What I do know about United after this game is I think Eriksen is a lot better than Mason Mount in that role. That was clear. I think Eriksen's almost a serviceable number 8 now. I thought last season it was a bit iffy because I don't like his work off the ball as much, but he looks like enough of a presence in there. I think he's in good positions. His experience of playing it for a year now, I think it's starting to tell. So they looked more solid. Casemiro was playing more withdrawn in between the centre backs, particularly early. So it was definitely the tactic to not get exposed. So again, that's why I say this wasn't the game to judge them, because they did come in more negative. But yeah, like we just keep saying, maybe Højlund makes a little bit of a difference. I'm not going to pin that on a 19, 20-year-old. So I'm not expecting him to be the difference. He can make a difference because he looks a good player. But yeah, this United team just don't look any better than last season. And that's the main point. And I think with that being said, I think it transitions into the perfect question of, it's the same question, but it's the Arsenal perspective. Do you feel better about Arsenal after... I guess this is the official start to the season because we're at an international break now, so we can take a little bit of stock of what we've seen. And yeah, do they look a better team for you going forward this season?
They probably look a little bit more solid defensively with Rice in there, I'd say.
Yeah, he was good, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Rice was good.
And I do prefer... we've talked about this. I do prefer White as a right back because you saw those triangles then between Ødegaard, Saka, and White that did cause problems. And it just like because it just seemed like Saka seemed so isolated when Partey was playing at right back, whereas now he always, if he couldn't beat his man 1-on-1, he'd then pass it back to White. White would play a triangle with Ødegaard, or he'd play it back to Saliba. Like he'd have a ball to play back to keep possession and then switch sides rather than try to take on one and then lose the ball. So I do prefer that. And then, but that's obviously because that it allows you to play that way because Zinchenko was playing left back.
He's
as well.
so like you can see he's so much better at that inverted role than Thomas Partey. He's just so much better. He finds these creative balls that just change the whole angle of the attack, and then Arsenal, especially with Arsenal's threat on either wing, if he could do that and change the angle of attack so that United are a little bit off guard, and like Thomas Partey doesn't have that in his locker.
But it's not just
That's
that,
the
like,
difference for me.
but like the thing is, Zinchenko also overlaps at times as well with Martinelli, and he creates those triangles. And I just think that when you're introducing Rice as a number 6 and Havertz as a number 8, and I think we'll have like a little section on Havertz because a lot of people have been getting on his back. So I'm going to come to his defense. So we'll do that. We'll do that a little bit later.
Another Kai Havertz defense.
Once we've wrapped up the game. But like I think with the introduction of those two and how important Xhaka was in that number 8 role last year, you're almost starting. You've at least taken one step back in terms of team chemistry. I know the core. I know like 8 players out of the 11 are all the same, but you're still starting with 2 players and 2 players in midfield as well. So they still need to build up those that chemistry. You still need to build up those triangles, those patterns of play. So they do need to be taught all that stuff. It's probably easier for Rice because he's sitting and holding. So it's just okay. Break up the play, find the pass to Ødegaard, find the pass to Saka. Find those forward passes pretty much. So it's easier for him than someone like Havertz who has to make forward runs, has to make triangles. He probably has a lot more instructions than what Rice does because he's playing a position that's a little bit more further forward.
Yeah, and I think the main because it sounds like when you've gone through everything that you said you liked, sounds like this game, the approach was more, let's go back to at least the same shape that we played last season. Because you say it was a bit of a recycling of a tactic that he might have used last season, Arteta, in terms of sitting off United. So it was a bit more like last season, and obviously Gabriel comes in to the team. And yeah, I think they weren't as swashbuckling. That might have something to do with Bukayo Saka not really having a very good game.
I thought he had an okay game. It was better than against Fulham and those 3 early games.
He's Bukayo Saka, so he's always okay, I'd say. But and he'll always draw gravity. But yeah, and I don't know what kills me about Arsenal, because I was asking the question from the start of the game because I was so kind of shocked by myself in terms of asking why Gabriel wasn't starting when I've said from the start I don't think he's the answer to Arsenal, or he's got to be the guy who will be in the team if Arsenal are able to beat Man City and get to where they want to go. Gabriel, I don't know how to say his last name. Centre back.
Magalhaes, I think.
We'll talk about the Ford Gabriel Jesus in a minute as well. But I found myself asking the question, like, why? Firstly, why did I come to his defense? Because I think he had a pretty good season last season, and that's got to count for something. I mean, what's the point of having a good season if I'm not going to change my opinion of you? So I thought he had a good season last season. He was a little iffy down the stretch, but Arsenal were a little iffy down the stretch, so I can't pin that on him. And then the second question, and I think the more important question is he actually the guy who should be in this Arsenal team going forward, or is there someone that I think that Arsenal could upgrade with him? And I think there is, but I only found one guy who Arsenal could upgrade there. And I think if they were, and this is what annoys me, and this will bring us to the Kai Havertz point, but if they could go out and get an Alessandro Bastoni from Inter, I think he is the ideal left-sided centre-back for that Arsenal to take them to the next level because he's better on the ball. If you don't want Zinchenko overlapping, underlapping, he can actually overlap and underlap at the appropriate times. So you'll get an extra weapon there. He's imperious. He's a physical specimen. He's young. And I don't know how much it would have cost. Inter would have been fighting hard to keep it, but also Inter in financial trouble. And we saw across town as well at AC what happens if you come in with the right bid for Sandro Tonali. They had to let him go, and he didn't even want to go. So he's one who I thought if you could just redirect the Kai Havertz funds, maybe keep Xhaka, maybe you needed someone in that midfield. I don't know if it's the answer, but he's the one who could have upgraded. Maybe I think they had the right tactic in going for a midfielder because I think Xhaka was more important to replace with either someone younger or someone better than Gabriel was to replace him at the back because he had a good season, like I say. So they got the right tactic, but I just think they got it wrong with this Havertz one. And yeah, I wish that money was spent somewhere else, but this gives you a perfect chance to offer your Kai Havertz defense because I think we can all agree he looked like a man absolutely bereft of confidence out there. Maybe not even a man, maybe more of a boy, but he's just, not great.
Look, I don't want the way that I'm going to start it is I don't want. I'm going to compare it similarly to Bergkamp, and I'm not saying Kai Havertz is the next coming of Bergkamp, but you can also draw comparisons to managers, for instance. Sir Alex didn't win anything his first 3 seasons, and then I think in his 4th season did he win the FA Cup or something? And then and then he went on and but he finished I think 2nd and 11th, 8th, and then I think he finished 2nd again or 3rd. So with managers, he needed time to settle into his and get his team all ready and build everything the way he wanted to have things built. Obviously, managers should be compared with managers. So comparing for instance with Arteta, where Arteta wins the FA Cup, finishes 8th, finishes 5th, finishes 2nd. But players, for instance, I think Bergkamp. I think a lot of Arsenal fans are actually getting on his back because I think his first, I think it was either 8 games or 11 games. It took him a while to actually bed in, and I think he got his first goal after 8 or 11 games. For some reason, those 2 numbers are in my head, but people were calling him a flop and whatnot. If I remember, seeing some of the newspaper clippings when you go back and whatnot. So a lot of people were getting on his back, and then he turned it himself into an Arsenal legend. Yes, and like Kai Havertz, I think he won the Champions League with Ajax, if I'm not mistaken. I think in 90, and was it 94 or 96?
95 or 6.
I think yeah. So he's a Champions League winner. He came to Arsenal as a Champions League winner, if I'm not mistaken. Kai Havertz, Champions League winner as well. But my point is, give this guy time to settle in. He's only 22 years old. He's just come to the club. No one can seem to find a position for him because he played under Tuchel, played under Lampard. Was there another coach at Chelsea that he played under?
He's 24, by the way.
24.
22 well, okay. Just didn't sound right to me.
Okay.
I'm like, he's not 20.
Okay, he's 24. Whatever. Anyway. But he's still in that age. He's not even 25, pretty much. So he played under, I think, 2 or 3 different coaches at Chelsea. And this is a Chelsea that the whole team has been horrible, and they're still continuing to be horrible. And
as Matty said, it was out of position as well. I know there's defenses
and that's the thing. Right now, Arteta is trying to... A lot of people might say, oh, he's trying to shoehorn him into a position. But it's well, he's trying to redevelop him and trying to teach him a new position. We've seen players change positions even in their 20s and whatnot. Even for instance, myself, I first started playing as a centre back just because I was tall and strong. when I first started playing football and as an under 11. And then I transitioned into a forward. And then I transitioned
Is
into
this
a
a Kai
midfielder.
Havertz
No,
defense,
no, no,
or is this
but I'm
your
just saying.
career stats?
No,
Give us some stats now. Goals, appearances.
but my point is, there is development and there is learning new positions as well. So you can't expect him to just, like, yes, some players just come in straight away, they score a goal in their debut, they set the world alight. That happens. But for a lot of players, they need to be given time. And I'm more than willing to give him even this whole season to be. I'm more than willing to give him this whole season before I start making any judgments.
Okay, all right. But firstly, on the Bergkamp point, number one, I think with Bergkamp, he was cheeky physical. He was a big guy, Dennis Bergkamp. And the second thing is he came from a different league. He'd never played in the Premier League before. So I think it's right to give him at least 11 games to start to bed in to a new league, to a new country, everything like that. Kai Havertz didn't even leave the city. He'd been in the city for, 4 years now? 3-4 years at least at Chelsea. So I doubt he would have had to move houses. So there's no excuse there. And furthermore, he knew the league. He knows what he's playing in now. There's no acclimatizing to the Premier League. He's been playing in it for years. So I don't think I get your point on letting him bed in and letting him. That's the change in the new team. For me, it's a little bit of a look at how clever I am sort of signing from Arsenal. It's like, let's reinvigorate this guy. There's a player there, and that's the premise I will always disagree with on Kai Havertz. I don't think there's a particularly great player there. I got to be honest. I just don't think. To Mutty's point that he made on the last pid, the mental fortitude, I'm not sure is there. I haven't seen it. He is 24. He is a young player. He will improve because he is 24 and he's a young player and now he's playing under a good manager. So I'll give you that. I'll concede that point. But I'm not judging Kai Havertz off the 4 Arsenal games I've seen. I'm judging him off the 4 Premier League years that I've seen. And that's why. And honestly, even when they got him from Leverkusen, I thought 70 mil, that's a little bit rich for a. And I keep saying this, that those players in that mold, the João Felixes, the Charles de Ketelaeres, these number 10s who are languid, who I think they hypnotize scouts. They're just like, oh, look at this graceful guy who's got a bit of height, who plays as the number 10 and who has this great technique. It's just like, dude, like, what are we watching? I don't think there's much more than that. I'd rather a Christopher Nkunku in there who can do something dynamic and who can break lines like that. So I get all your points, but you're never going to convince me that Kai Havertz is a good player. He's the only one who can convince me that he's a good player, and so far I haven't seen it. But to your point, he does need more time. I'm not ready to call him a flop yet. I'm just saying 60-odd million, 70-odd million could have been redirected somewhere better for me. Possibly,
yeah. Like, I'll admit that I personally would not have paid 65 mil for him, but that's down to the 2 clubs that negotiated the sale price. So I think all credit to Chelsea on that point for
they did well.
They did well on their end. Time will tell whether Arsenal did well on their end, but I do stand by my point at the start of the season. I think if he can get 10 goals, 10 assists as a midfielder, if he can bring in those numbers in all competitions, and if he's playing week in, week out, that's going to be some 40, 50 games. If he can get those numbers as a number 8, I think that's an excellent season. And I think that people will say that is a successful signing. If it's 15 goal contributions, so a mixture of 10 to 15 goal contributions, I think that will be a very good season. But yeah, it just depends what his role is in the team, because he started the Community Shield as a number 9. The last 4 games he started as a number 8. So depends where he's playing. If if Nketiah and Jesus get injured and he starts playing as a number 9, I would expect 15 goals, 10 to 15
Yeah.
goals. Um,
Yeah, all competitions. Of course.
yeah,
I think
exactly.
that's a good point. What you bring up in terms of what success is for, and maybe it's an insight into why Arsenal did direct those funds that way. Because if we saw them last season, they had 3 players who I think in the league alone got 10 of each goals and assists in Martinelli, Erdegaard, and Saka. So I
I
guess the thinking might be there. Can we add another guy to have maybe 4 players who can do that? So. And that's why they directed the funds there rather than looking at a striker. And I guess that leads us, unless you have anything else, to the last point. Um, I don't know. Was this a game
well,
that said?
well,
Was
hang
this
on.
the game that said it?
Just for
Okay,
the
yeah,
record, just for
yeah,
you,
go on.
you mentioned that he most likely didn't have to move houses. He's already played 3 to 4 years in the Premier League. I never mentioned any of that stuff, but I mentioned betting into this team because he's going to be playing. He's never played as a number 8, so if he's playing as an 8, he's learning that position. Give the lad time.
It doesn't explain why he forgot how to strike a ball when he's 6 yards out from goal.
You know what?
Anyway,
You know what that is though. I reckon everyone has gotten onto his back so early,
yeah, no confidence.
including the Arsenal fans. Yeah, like there's very little confidence there,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
very
for sure.
unfortunate. Like, whereas if they showed him like love, just and like try to show him like support rather than immediately dismissing him,
I
then
think they've been that bad. Given what I've seen from Arsenal fans over the years, they haven't been that harsh on him. I think
I've
some of them are trying. I think a few, but I think that performance that he turns in is like, what the hell am I getting behind? What the
But
hell
you
is
know
this
what?
guy doing?
I did not mind. I did not mind his performance against United that too much. Like I thought that this was actually probably one of his better performances, like
Well,
all
that says
round.
it all for me.
I know that
Unfortunately,
we'll obviously get to the first goal. I know that he played a square pass, like a
we'll
first time
get to
square
it. Is there
pass.
more to talk
No,
about?
no, no, like
This guy?
this is the
Oh yeah, it
transition.
was his
This
pass.
is this is the
Yeah, go
transition. Like he obviously played a first time square pass in the middle of the field, trying to find I think Erdegaard, if I'm not mistaken, and then that leads to the first goal. And yeah, like I think something like that. It's like he's trying to possibly do things that maybe a little bit more riskier to try and look. Oh yeah, like I can play a really good first time pass instead of just okay, let's bring it all back to something really simple. Bring down the ball, control it, play it to Zinchenko, play it to Martinelli, play it to Nketiah, not a square pass to try and switch the play to Erdegaard. And yeah, that obviously leads to the first goal. And you know what? Like, was it Ericsson or Bruno that played? I think it was Ericsson that played that pass.
Ericsson played the ball, and
It was a really nice ball.
yeah, no, it was a really nice ball. Saliba's defending isn't great there. I
No,
think Ben White
Ben
does.
White's
I think
defending was
Ben White
horrible.
does. Who's?
Ben White's as well.
No, I thought Ben White did the right thing. I think he was ready to show Rashford down the line. That's where Saliba needs to step in and block the avenue inside. I think between the two of them, they could have done better. I think
It seemed like they
that's
both.
for me. It's not for Ben White to block the avenue inside because he's the one playing right back. He's the one who has to be wary of Rashford going on the outside of him. For me, it's Saliba who has to block the avenue in. And Saliba just sort of stands right behind Ben White. There's one camera angle where you can see it perfectly. His angle is just right behind Ben White, so he's not affecting the game in any way, shape, or form there. And maybe he expects Rashford. I don't know why you'd expect Rashford to go on the outside because he's right-footed and he wants to, from that range, he wants to cut in and shoot. So I thought it was bad defending by Saliba. I'll give him a pass because he's a great defender, but in that moment he did cover himself in glory. I've had enough of talking about Kai Havertz, but one thing that Kai Havertz has done is he's taken a little bit of heat off another guy who normally gets heat in that Arsenal team. And I wasn't annoyed about the groundswell that built up for Eddie and Nketiah to start this game, but I was surprised by it. I'm like, I think we're overrating what he's been doing. I think he has improved on last season. I'll give him that. I even gave him that on the first pod. I could see a more visible, sort of closer to Gabriel Jesus kind of press from the front, and I was like, yeah, that's all right. But come on, like I think if Gabriel Jesus is fit, and maybe his fitness isn't 100%, so maybe that's why. But if they're both fit, it's got to be Gabriel Jesus over Nketiah. I'm sorry, Nketiah in this game, and like I don't want to take too much from one game. Maybe he still surprises me. He has surprised me to this point. Maybe he goes beyond the level I think he can reach. But his level for me is a top quality backup striker for a team challenging for the title. When the other striker's fit, he shouldn't play ahead of him. So maybe it was a fitness thing, but for me, if they're both fully fit, it's got to be Gabriel Jesus.
I'd say it's fitness because Jesus didn't even come on against Fulham.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
He was on the bench. So
yeah. And I think that's my last point on this game. So anything you've got left to go through?
Just quickly regarding the refereeing decisions, because Ten Hag definitely made some comments.
He was so salty.
Yeah.
He was so salty after trying to complain about the offsides.
Oh, how do you complain about that? Like, there's dozens of cameras and they're all calibrated. And
but honestly, I think in my ideal world that goal actually stands. To be quite like, you should just get one view at it, no lines, and then if you can't see that's a clear and obvious, go with on-field decision.
No, see, that's
but
the
once
thing,
you get the lines out, you can't complain once they get the lines out. But what I will say is even Serie A uses semi-automated technology, the kind we saw at the World Cup. How the Premier League isn't already using semi-automated?
I remember they put out a statement that they're choosing not to use semi-automated, even though the Champions League uses it, World Cup uses it, and I think some of the other leagues use it as well. I don't know.
Baffling.
What else was there? There was, there was a challenge by Højlund, and I saw slow motion of it. He actually made contact, and he got a yellow card for it. He actually made contact with Nketiah's head, studs to the head.
I must have missed that one.
I saw someone actually clipped it, and you can see his foot when it makes contact. It actually swings back.
Yeah.
So it's it studs up like that, and it's and he got a yellow card for it. It's how was this not reviewed? So
come on, he's just an eager boy. Leave the boy alone.
No. Did I say Højlund? It was Lindelof, not Højlund.
Oh, okay,
Lindelof.
That's fine. You can send Lindelof off.
Yeah, that was given a yellow card, but when I saw a replay of it, that wasn't it was sort of semi slowed down. I was like, this could have been a red card. And then when I saw another replay of it on Twitter, and someone really slowed it down so you can actually see the foot movement, and I was like, this should have been a red. So there's that decision. The penalty decision, I reckon that's a penalty because when you're running, obviously your feet are coming back, and it's almost like I'd compare it to someone riding a bike and you kick their front tire and their front tire wobbles, and it's you're why are you kicking someone's front tire when they're going full speed? Obviously you're creating a chance that they're going to fall. So it's the same thing when you're running and your feet are naturally going back, when you're taking the steps and you're making contact with someone's back foot, you're obviously going to cause imbalance. So it's not about leaving your foot behind. It's well, what do you want? Does everyone need to change their running style then? So yes, I reckon that should have been a penalty. Maybe it errs on the softer side of penalties, but it still should have been a penalty because you're still making contact with a person when they're running full speed, and you're going to cause them to lose their balance. So I think that should have been a penalty. I think it should have stood. What else was there?
I think that's the main one. But,
I think there was only those two. I think there might have been a third one, but I can't remember what.
Who cares? We don't.
Yeah.
Arsenal love it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think just quickly on that one, I think I don't think there was enough for a penalty, but once it was given, I don't think there was probably enough to overturn it. I think Gary Neville said that after the game as well, and I agree that especially after he said what we've seen so far this season, the the bar to overturn, I instantly think of the Alexis McAllister one against Bournemouth. How that wasn't overturned there and then was baffling to me. So they clearly came in with a high bar and they changed it for that one. So after it was given, it probably should have stood. I get your point on that. Have an indecision on whether that is or not, because is it the attacking player's obligation to hurdle challenges, or should the defender just not be leaving their foot in the first place, even if there is no contact? I don't know. I just think we need to revise the whole penalty system, because penalties are 75% a goal, and sometimes you make fouls on the corner of the box and it leads to a 75% chance at a goal. It's just like, and it's a nothing foul as well. So, like, I get it, players should be more aware of that, but you shouldn't pay a punishment like that and change a whole game like that for such an innocuous foul. I think you should really have to earn penalties, and that's why I err on the side of that not being a penalty, not having enough. But
I didn't watch the Forest game. Was it Forest Man United last week? Someone mentioned that Rashford got a penalty for it was really similar.
That was really actually similar. The challenge came in, it came across him, but it didn't really make contact. And then when Rashford was trying to run past the challenge, then his thigh kind of made contact with it. And I thought the same thing. I thought, you know what, maybe this shouldn't be given, but once it's given, it's there. And that's enough on referees for me, anyway.
And probably enough,
where do you want to go
on
next?
This game.
Yeah, I'd say so. We did as long as the preview.
Pretty much, yeah. Let's go to Merseyside. Let's go to your boys.
Yeah, good choice. Did you watch this game?
No, because I was going to football myself. So I actually watched the Arsenal United game later on that night. Luckily, I didn't know the result, so I watched it as if I watched it live. So that was nice.
Yeah, nice. Wow, I mean, did you see the goals? You must have seen the Szoboszlai goal by now.
No, I haven't watched any of it yet, but I need to at least go back and rewatch the goals. So I haven't had time just yet. So
if you watch the highlights, watch the Szoboszlai goal. It's great. Left-footed strike. I think on commentary, I think Stephen Warnock said it reminded him of the Thiago one against Porto in the Champions League a couple of years back, where he sort of hits it into the ground, but it's not one of those ones that hits into the ground and top spins. It just skims off the surface and then flies into the far.
It's always rising
fast. Yeah, it was always rising. That's exactly.
Similar to De Bruyne's one against Real as well, because that one would always seem like it kept on rising, but it was like hit really low.
Except these two sort of hit into the ground, whereas the De Bruyne one obviously is from the turf. These are kind of like half volleys, but what a goal! Liverpool's performance in this game, I thought it was our best performance of the season. And how fascinating that I'm sitting here and saying that when Virgil van Dijk's not in the team. And honestly, when it's Joel Matip and Joe Gomez playing next to each other. Now, I thought Joe Gomez's positioning was great. I always like his speed at centre-back. Honestly, that's that 18-19 season where we pushed City all the way to the title. Our best centre-back partnership was Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk, and I thought that was so physically dominant that's what made him that good. And Joe Gomez's recovery speed was so good as well. So he hasn't quite got that speed, but he hasn't lost it necessarily. I still fancy him in any race pretty much up against any forward player. For the most part, his positioning was good. There was one moment with Moussa Diaby who was really good in this game, actually. He was the bright spot for Aston Villa. But yeah, there was one moment where he read it fine, and then he makes the mistake with the ball, and that's where Joe Gomez's problems are in terms of I don't quite trust him with the ball at his feet. But I thought Joel Matip was excellent, apart from the sitter that he missed in the first half. He was really good. His positioning was good. He looked like a presence there, so it was funny that those two centre-backs made it look like... And it was actually Alexis McAllister playing the pivot as well. So those three, that sort of trifecta of players who were meant to be your key defensive pieces, going into the season, you wouldn't have fancied any of them as key defensive pieces for you, but we turned in our best performance. I just wonder if... Well, probably our best defensive performance. And that's not to say Villa were without their chances. They fluffed their lines on a few occasions. And look, Liverpool even when they were great defensively a couple of seasons back, they're going to give you chances. They are a team who give you chances. So I can't sit here and say I expect us not to be miserly and give nothing away. That would be unfair for me to say, but in this game, I think we limited them, and honestly, we just went forward so many times. We're opening Villa up. I mean, this was this was kind of what I would have expected to see if Arsenal were playing at their swashbuckling best and trying to go at that United defense. But we already talked about that tactics might have been different. But Liverpool were just going forward with such regularity. Trent, it's not it's not Trent playing in the central midfield role, although I do love it. And it's obviously very different to the way that we normally play because Robbo and Trent were such an avenue for creativity in our heyday when a couple of years ago, 3, 4 years ago as well. This is definitely a reinvention because obviously if Trent goes inside, he's not going to be overlapping, and Robbo now has to become one of the three defenders to sit, so he's not overlapping at any times really at all really in the game. So it's so different. But Trent in that central midfield role looks great. Robbo was full of aggression in his tackles, but it's like I was saying, it's not this. It's not the fact that he's playing central midfield for Trent. It's he looks physically stronger. He looks a little quicker. He looks like he's actually trying to take some pride in his defensive work. There was particularly one moment I can't. I think we made a mistake in the build-up, and it was Diaby running through. Yeah, and then he released McGinn. I think last season Trent doesn't get himself back into the picture as much as he did in that moment. He really busted he broke his neck to get back in and try to affect the situation in any way possible. And I think that's what when Liverpool playing good defensive football, that's what they do. That's what all the players do. That's what Virgil used to do as well and what he was so good at. So I think maybe the message after the Newcastle game, maybe it's been to be more compact, like we had to be when we were at 10 men. But yeah, it didn't stymie us going forward, that's for sure. And I might have to eat my words a bit on the Soboslai signing because I thought that was a little bit overpriced, even though we were getting a good player. But man, he looks something else. He's a physical specimen. He gets up and down. He looks like he's fitting of wearing that number 8 shirt for Liverpool, to be quite honest, which is no mean feat.
Big call.
It is a big call, but I'm not saying he's got to be Steven Gerrard, but I am saying he's closer to Steven Gerrard than Naby Keita was, that's for sure. So, and look, I might be doing a disservice to Naby Keita because before his injury in that first season, he looked like he was going to be really good as well. So, but Soboslai looks a different animal, particularly physically. Who gets that third spot? That might be a question mark still for Liverpool, but I must say I do like Alexis as the holding midfielder, but I don't know if that's a viable option for the whole season. There's so many options. I mean, we brought Gakpo and Jota off the bench, so up front there's no problems. And Darwin even looked pretty good in this game. Maybe he has some confidence from that Newcastle game. He would feel that he could have had 1 or 2 goals in this game as well. Mo is he's not a worry. He's always going to get his numbers. He's always relentless. He's got to pass the ball. He's got to fucking pass the ball. His finishing has been woeful for 2 seasons. Ever since our last really good season where we nearly won we were in for the quadruple.
It's been poor since the AFCON.
Yeah, it has been really poor, the finishing. And if his finishing doesn't get better, he's got to start looking to pass balls because the running is still fantastic. The relentless nature of what he's trying to do is still fantastic, but he's got to start thinking more goals for the team rather than goals for himself in some moments. I'm not saying change your DNA because your DNA is to be selfish and that's what's made you such a prolific goal scorer, but just tweak it just a tiny bit. But all in all, I can't complain. I'm pretty upbeat, and it breaks the trend of what we had last season in terms of getting what we felt would be a monumental result and then going and losing next week. And we could conceivably maybe not have lost given that we were at home, but we could conceivably have drawn this game against Aston Villa, who have been the informed side since Unai Emery came in. But as well, Liverpool, all of last season, only lost 1 game at home, and that was a bit of a freak result against Leeds. And we are now on the longest unbeaten run in the Premier League. So I don't know. Like those stats suggest that we're trying to get somewhere back to where we were. We've made a great start to the season. We're on 10 points, the same as Arsenal. I'm not going to say where we should be in the mix with Manchester City and even Arsenal yet. But I am going to say I wouldn't be surprised if after 12 games we are. Because our ceiling, as we keep saying, is really high. So if we can sort out that floor and get that floor raised, there's no reason why we can't be the best of the chasing pack. But ultimately, I don't know. I don't know how much it's going to matter, but we're only 4 games in, so I don't know anything about that yet.
Just quickly while we wrap up with Liverpool, me and you, I don't think we got to discuss the whole Mo Salah Saudi bid. I'm not sure if I did hear something that the Saudi transfer window is still. I think it still might be open, or like at least it closes like 3 or 4 days after the English one or the Europe one. So I'm not sure if it's still open as we speak. But would you have sold him? Because I think the offer was like 150, 160 mil. I know that it was like offered like on transfer deadline day or something like that. So would you have gotten rid of him on the actual day, knowing that you weren't going to get a replacement at least until January?
I missed the last part of your question, but in terms of,
would you have sold him?
Yeah, if it was for that reported 150,
but knowing that you weren't going to get a replacement until January.
Well, of course, you know that. That's why I guess that's part of why the offer is so high. But the problem is, for all the attackers we have, there's not a natural replacement on that right-hand side. I guess it would be. Look, Gakpo's so good because he's so versatile. He would maybe be choice 1, or Darwin would be the first choice on the right. So then neither are natural replacements on that side. So, but for 150 million euros,
for like a 31-year-old or 32-year-old,
yeah, given his age, man, that's a tough one because I never want to be as sacrilegious as to say we should sell Mo Salah. But for that amount of money, I'd be very tempted. Let me put it that way. So,
and especially considering I think he's going to have 1 year left on his contract next year. So maybe next year you get 100 mil for him rather than 150.
That would be great. I would. Well, depending on the season he has, he could still have a blistering season with the golden boot and all of that. So I wouldn't put it past Mo. He's so good like that. And that's the thing. I think this offer was there for Mo if he wanted to go the whole time, and I don't think he ever really wanted to go. I think he has Liverpool goal scoring records in his mind and in his heart, really, to be quite honest. So I think that's kind of maybe leading into his over selfishness at times, having that so on his mind, because he's won everything there is to win with Liverpool now. So that's got to be the last step, and to do it at a club as prestigious as Liverpool, I think it's a really admirable trait that he has. So I would, like I said, I would never be as sacrilegious as to say we should sell Mo Salah. So even if we had 150 mil on the table, the fact that he wants to stay and we want him to stay is not a bad outcome from the whole thing. It can never be bad to have Mo Salah on your team. So yeah, I'm not disappointed in that, but I would have had my head turned for that much money, that's for sure.
Because didn't you guys sell Coutinho for like a similar amount? But Coutinho was like what, 20, 25,
yeah. And
26.
he rejuvenized the defense with the Van Dijk and Alisson signings thereafter.
But that was like early in the window, so you guys had time to get Van Dijk and
that was
Alisson.
January. Because I remember that
was still early enough.
It
wasn't like January 30th.
We still went out and got Van Dijk in the same window. But I remember, just on a side note, that start of the season before we sold Coutinho, that was probably the most exciting Liverpool were under Jurgen Klopp, I would say. But they were flawed. They didn't have Van Dijk and they didn't have Alisson yet, so they were still flawed defensively. But watching Coutinho, Mane, Firmino and Salah all break forward and all go forward at pace, and then Wijnaldum joining in, that was good fun to watch. That was really good fun to watch.
Yeah, I remember they were pretty exciting back then.
Well, they made the Champions League final that season as well, obviously.
Maybe you would have won it if you held on to Coutinho.
Doubtful, because we wouldn't have had Van Dijk at the back, and Real Madrid have our number. So the fact that we had to play them in the final, that was curtains, really.
Not only do they have your number, but I heard that Ramos still has Mo Salah's arm as well. got it up on the mantle like a hunting trophy.
He's just got a picture of it. He signed a picture of it.
Speaking of Ramos, he went back to Sevilla as a free agent.
Yeah.
I saw, I saw actually some of like the list of free agents. Like Kasper Schmeichel was there, but I think he's now found a club. Ramos was there. I think there was like one or two others. I was like, they would actually be pretty decent recruits. I know they're like 35, 30, in that mid-30s range, but like it wouldn't be too bad to bring them in as like, just a second or third choice in whatever position that is, and maybe start getting them to do their coaching badges, and then like bringing them in as a like a mentor for these younger guys, especially considering they don't have a transfer fee associated to them, but higher wages. Anyway, let's do a quick wrap of the rest of the results in the Premier League, and then I don't know, we'll do around Europe and give you your little 15-20 minutes of.
Yeah, it won't be long.
Yeah.
It's so much harder to watch games now.
Did you watch the Tottenham game?
I watched the first half of it. I didn't watch the Rampage.
You didn't watch the Rampage. Well, I was sort of switching between channels as well because I had a multi-bet on, so it was obviously Chelsea that screwed everything up, along with Newcastle as well. But yeah, I was when I saw that like Tottenham won, I think it was like 5-2 in the end. I was like, whoa, like yeah. And I saw some of the highlights as well from that game, and yeah, like they seem to be playing some really nice football.
Let's just hope for their sake this isn't Son repeating his trick of last season, because he scored that hat-trick against Leicester at home and then didn't score for like however many months after that. So let's hope this, well, maybe let's not hope, but let's hope for Tottenham's sake that this opens the floodgates and he becomes the free-flowing, goal-scoring Son Heung-min again, for their sake. Because, yeah, they're playing well. I think Tottenham's questions, given that there's been this, the first question has been answered with a massive, probably 2 thumbs up in terms of how Ange would adapt and how the fans would take to Ange, and I guess they were probably beaten so badly over the last few years with Mourinho and Conte that breath of fresh air that came in terms of the football. But I think in terms of the media as well, how well Ange is winning those battles and how well received he's been in terms of the English media has been really positive as well. So that's why you probably get 2 thumbs up there. And the football looks so much better. The signings look good as well. In terms of, I think maybe they've uncovered something with Van de Ven at centre back. It looks like a good partnership between him and Romero. I've already said I like Udogie. Maddison's hit the ground running, but I think all of these players, given Udogie's age, given Van de Ven's lack of sort of testing, given Romero his sort of track record as one of the 2, even though obviously Argentina won the World Cup with him as one of the 2, but given his recklessness as one of the 2, and given, have we ever seen a James Maddison great campaign from start to finish? He's been playing at Leicester. He hasn't played at this level. So
he's had injury problems. So if he can stay injury free, then
that too.
That's going to be telling.
And obviously the question I already raised with Son. So their questions come with consistency. Can they keep this up? Can they continue to roll in this manner? So let's rejudge Tottenham after 10 to 12 games. But like I said, 2 thumbs up for the start and the questions that they've already answered. So they have a chance to be in with a big shout of top 5, I guess we call it now. And given the fact that it's opened up to 5, why the hell not? Why can't they finish in the top 5? Given what Chelsea did on the weekend as well.
Not just Chelsea, but the way Newcastle has started as well. I think they've only picked up 4 points from their first 4 games.
Let's finish the Premier League on Newcastle, because I think that's the last big sort of game and topic to cover. So,
well then Chelsea,
Oh my
Man,
god! I thought, to be fair, when I saw the result, I thought they were away from home. So I'm like, it's
that's why I put them in
understandable.
my multi. I'm like, okay, like they won 3-0 at Luton, I think. I'm like, okay, maybe they've got
Yeah.
their scoring boots on. They're starting to, they should kick on now. Playing at home in front of that Stamford Bridge crowd, blew it.
Oi, what to say about
They just
Chelsea?
seem what I like because I was flicking through it, but I watched the Chelsea game the most. Like they just seem blunt. Like, and I'll I'll mention it here. I'm thinking about doing a little, you know, 20-minute piece on the curious case of the Chelsea number 9 because honestly, we mentioned it sort of tongue in cheek, but there probably is some kind of curse there. Like maybe when Drogba was there, like you know, like we're all aware that like you know in Africa you have those shamans and those voodoo witch doctors and stuff. They still practice that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that I 100% believe in it, but like that sort of stuff, like there are people that believe in it, and maybe there's some truth to it where like when Drogba was there, you know, there was a witch doctor from Ivory Coast that was like protecting him and protecting that position. But then those rival witch doctors that were trying to put some kind of curse on it. And then when Drogba left, obviously the curse remained. So who knows? And like it's like the only thing that you can explain it because like out of all the how many forwards have they had? I think Diego Costa's only the last one that had some success. I think he scored like 20 goals or something. So like he's the only one that had some success, but other than that, like everyone has sucked. And then like Nkuku bloody he comes back from a long-term injury. And you're like, okay,
I don't think.
but like hang on, he comes back. I think he helps RB Leipzig make the top 4 in like the last stretch of 6-7 games. They win the German Cup as well.
Yeah.
And then he what breaks his ACL or whatever the term is, tears his ACL.
He's out until the start of the new year is the last I heard.
So 6
so
months.
not quite the whole season, but yeah.
But still, but he still misses 6 months, and you're like this guy. Like he was coming off a fantastic end of the season. He looked pretty good in preseason, and then yeah, like he has his injury, like a half-season injury. It's like,
well, not just that. He's been a top player for 2 years now, and I think when you talk about blunt, that's killed Chelsea. But it was maybe unfair to call him injury prone after the end of last season. Maybe that what happened to him last season was a one-off. But now that it's happened again, given the type of player he is, he might be in that bracket of injury prone, which is absolutely devastating. It should be devastating for football fans because honestly, when you talk about blunt, this guy was going to solve 85% of Chelsea's problems at the start of the new year. I don't think they lose to Nottingham Forest if he's in the team. I think if they play in the system that they're playing right now, but it's him, and it's harsh for me to say instead of Sterling, but maybe it could be as well as Sterling, because I think Sterling's actually started the season quite well.
he has.
But Nkuku is a next level player for me to Raheem Sterling. He's a player who not only himself is next level to Sterling, he can help take the team to the next level. And a lot would have been on his shoulders, and that's a lot to ask, but he is of prime age to take that all on. And he already took it on at RB Leipzig as well. So it was just a step up in terms of club. And yeah, I think that's done Chelsea in because honestly, I think the system they play is quite good. The football they play, look, they're coming off a really bad season last season, so it's unfair to expect it to be perfect from the start. There's no doubt it's better for me, but I'm just still a little underwhelmed with the signings. I just think the approach, I think ever since they lost Abramovich, they've been in disarray. I'm not breaking ground by saying this, but they just seem so scattershot with their signings, and they still do. And you'd think after the summer that they would have been better at it, but Caicedo's a good player. They overpaid massively for him for me, massively. Lavia, again, I think they overpaid for him as well, but maybe he'll be better. But they're not players who are going to add goals from midfield. Not even Enzo Fernandez adds goals from midfield. He scored 1 goal in senior football in Europe, which is just a mind-blowing stat when you think that he now is probably Chelsea's most creative midfielder. They just haven't got the right profile there. So if I compare them directly, they might have gone in the same approach in terms of striker. A striker who doesn't score goals but brings others into the game. I think Nicholas Jackson looks like a decent prospect at doing that. He's not going to be super prolific. Maybe 1 or 2 seasons he might hit 20 goals. Maybe overall competitions, maybe in the league. He's not that type of striker, though, for me. Season after season, 20 goals in the league. He's not going to get that. But what Arsenal have done so well is that they've got 3 other pieces around it who can all on their day, score the goal or provide the assist. Chelsea have none of those players. They've got one, or maybe 3/4 of one in Raheem Sterling at the moment. So there's your problem right there. If it's not going to be the striker, and it can't be the striker for the reason that you said in terms of the curse of the Chelsea striker, but if it can't be the striker, it's got to be from elsewhere. And I guess maybe Chilwell will expect to pop, but maybe Chilwell's effect lessens when he doesn't have Reece James on the other side, and Reece James is injury prone as well. So yeah, the talk of Chelsea being revitalised back to the point where they were in. I don't know. Maybe it's too early to say that as well, because they still can put a run together. But right now, I don't know this, but I think that they're not as good as Liverpool. And to your point that you made on the last pod, we might have to keep revisiting that Tottenham versus Chelsea discussion, because right now Tottenham are winning, hands down.
Yeah. But, I heard one of the like a caller mention, like, why didn't Tottenham try, Chelsea, since they're already spending more than willing to spend 100 mil on like 3 players. They did spend 100 mil on 3 players, right? There was Enzo, Caicedo. I think, was there one more or no? But they spent like 60 mil on Lavia, and then obviously all the other players around. So why weren't they willing to go 110, 120 mil for Harry Kane? Like, Bayern got him for 100. So I know he's
Harry Kane's never going to Chelsea, especially like in terms of the shit show that they are at the moment. He's not touching that.
But even so, like, why didn't they even try to go for it?
Fair enough.
But then I also saw someone like tongue in cheek mention that like Leonardo DiCaprio must be head of recruitment for them, because apparently they didn't go for James Maddison because he was 26 years old, whereas all their signings have been like 21, 22, 23. So like no one over 25. That's their recruitment policy. But yeah, like, it's just, something's just not right up front. And then like Lukaku as well, they had him on the books, but is he out on loan at Roma now?
Yeah, at Roma, yeah.
It's like, well, why didn't Poch try to integrate him into the team? Or is it too far gone with the fans based on what he did?
It was too far. That one was too far. That one felt too far gone.
But still, like...
But I agree. If it wasn't, I would have tried with Lukaku.
Yeah, like, if he came into the team and scored 5 goals in these opening 4 games, I think the fans would be like, okay, we forgive you so long as you continue along this line, and we're going to get behind you.
Talk, yeah.
But yeah, like, it's just... Yeah.
They at least look better this season, but
they do look
I
better.
agree.
They do look better.
They're blunt. They need to find some goals.
And I did see something else where, like, I think, like, their rankings in terms of, like, crosses, chances created, like, dribbles, passes into the opposition, they're like first, second. They're like in the top 3 in all those attacking stats. So they're doing something right in terms of the way that they're playing. But yeah, they're just blunt in terms of putting the ball in the back of the net. And like you said, they don't have anyone, like, at least with Arsenal, like, you're going to get 10 plus goals from Martinelli, you're going to get 10 plus goals from Saka. I think Odegaard is already on 2 or 3, if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to get, and I think last season he was the highest scoring non-striker. I think he's finished with 16. So like, and the only people that were in front of him were actual, like, number 9s, or
that's so many goals from midfield.
Exactly,
16
like
goals from midfield is so many.
Yeah, and then top that off with the assists that he gave as well. I'm not sure if he reached 10 plus or not.
He did. I think he reached double figures in both.
Yeah,
I think all 3 of them. Like I said, I think all 3 got in both.
Yeah, they did a double.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, that's already like 40 goals right there, like amongst those three. And yeah, Chelsea just don't have
That's probably the difference
that.
right there as well between the two teams.
Yeah.
Because defensively, apart from goalkeeper, Ramsdale's not adverse to a bit of a clanger here and there himself. So, yeah, defensively, I think they're very similar. Even in that midfield, they're as strong as each other. Yeah, honestly, it's
I
just
think
there.
on
It's like,
paper
where did the goal?
they're probably around equal in the midfield. I think
Yeah,
the thing that probably edges it in Arsenal's favour is they probably
it's
have
the
more.
Rice.
Yeah, but they also have the things like Erdegaard.
They got one creator.
No,
at
but
least.
Erdegaard has the experience of playing with the players around him, whereas like Erdegaard is new, and I know Havertz is new as well. Back on Havertz. Whereas like the three, I know Enzo played half a season, but the three midfielders now, if they expect Lavia to be in that three, they're all new, and they don't have they don't have that connection with each other, or like the wingers and the forwards. So they have to gel that as well. Whereas like at least Erdegaard has that connection with like all the players around him, and Rice is just he's Rice.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Let's finish on, I think, maybe the biggest story from the Premier League. I think, is it the hipsters will want to do this. I don't think it's quite there yet, but is it time to take Brighton as seriously as Newcastle in the league?
Well, the way that they play, yeah. That results in West Ham though last week was a bit of a weird one. Like they should have probably been on 12 points.
That was the other one I was going to say, because the other team on 10 points so far at this stage of the season is West Ham.
Yeah.
So we needed to start taking them seriously again. Because let's not forget, 2 seasons ago, they were in the thick of a top 4 challenge.
Yeah, and then last season they won they won the Conference League.
Exactly. Exactly right.
I think they'll fall off eventually as the season goes on.
Wait, who are we talking about? West Ham or Brighton? Oh, okay, we've taken a little side.
I know. Well, just and then we'll get that out of the way, because I think they have Europa League as well coming up, so that might just throw a little bit of a spanner in the works in terms of rotation and whatnot. Because I don't think they have a squad big enough to compete in Europe, and I know that they won the Conference League last year, but it's against a way lesser competition. Like this is against teams that are finishing 5th, 6th, like in all the top leagues. So they need to then prioritize what's better for them, finishing mid-table finishing mid-table to like 6th, 7th in the Premier League, or trying to maybe win the Europa League, because they probably could win it, but they have to then like put all their eggs in that basket and maybe sacrifice their Premier League.
They'd have to also get lucky. I think it's risky to go for the Europa League.
Yeah,
like you said, it's a harder competition than the Conference.
Especially
they won't be favourites.
Yeah, because you got Champions League teams dropping down. Like you had Juventus and Barcelona drop down, and yes, they got knocked out, but you had those two teams dropping down from the Champions League. But yeah, Brighton. Yeah, it was weird. No one would have expected West Ham to beat them, so they should have or could have been on 12 points right now rather than 9, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, the way that they're playing, like it's nice to watch. They're getting they're getting results. So not only are they playing well, but they're getting results as well. I still don't think that they're a top 5 team though.
Well, they're contending with. Is it Europa League? Were they 6th?
I think they got into Europa League, yeah.
So they're contending with European football in some form as well themselves. So I do agree. I think it's early to say that. Look, honestly, I was a little devastated with this result, because I thought Brighton were good value for it. I thought De Zerbi got his tactics right, particularly playing 2 up front to pin up against something we flagged after the Liverpool game for Newcastle in terms of Sven Botman getting injured, and now it's Dan Burn and Fabian Schär at the back, and I thought they were run, particularly Burn, I thought he was run a little bit ragged. I think Eddie Howe has a conundrum in terms of going forward, how long Botman's out. His conundrum is, do I want to keep playing this high intensity, high pressing football, knowing full well that I don't have my ace up my sleeve, my queen on the chessboard at the back to sort of mop everything up. I don't have him anymore. So I would dare say you can't play that way. Although, let's make no mistake about it. They were bad in this game against Brighton, but I thought they were out-thought. I could never say that Newcastle were out-fought because that's the identity of what's made them so good over the last 18 months or so. But they were out-thought in this game, and I think they need... And this is the bigger point, and look, I don't need to belabor the point that Nick Pope should be playing a little bit better himself, particularly in this game. The Man City one against Alvarez, I think he could have done a little bit better, but that's such a fine margin. It's a great strike from Alvarez. In this game, spilling the first one for the opening goal, which kind of changes the complexion of the match, because until that point, I thought Brighton was starting to get comfortable in the match, but Newcastle was still there and still had their threat on the counter-attack and their threat in terms of putting pressure on the ball. But for him to spill that and gift that goal to Ferguson, who goes on and scores a hat-trick, we must say, as well, that's kind of killed them. I don't think... Look, I think the effort's still there. I think the football is still there as well from Newcastle. But what I was going to say is, and it leads into the out-thought point, they need more strings to their bow now, because that intensity tactic is only good to a certain point. The intensity tactic is good to the point where it gets you into the top four and it gets you one hell of a season like the season they had last season. But when you become the hunted rather than the hunter, which I think everyone's been fully prepared to respect Newcastle going into this season and respect how good a team they are if you're not completely at your game and you need to approach that game like you're playing a really good team. Now that that's happened, where do you go to from here? Because now your opposition is playing to your intensity every week now, because they know what to expect when they play you. And yeah, I still think for the most part it's going to be enough to get them through most games, their intensity, and get them back into the thick of this fight for top five. I'm not writing them off, but burning 3 losses already is really, really bad. And when I talk about strings to their bow, and I know it's hindsight, and I know it's easy to say this now, the transfer market's closed and they've lost three games in the league on the bounce as well. But I do also want to flag that I did say this, I think in one of our late season pods at the end of last season, in terms of, I think we did a transfer targets for all of the big teams going into the summer. And the player that I flagged for Newcastle was Sergio Canales, who has since moved on to Mexico. But that was the profile of player I think Newcastle needed. And now I'm not saying they were wrong. I'm not saying they could have done things better, because I think when the opportunity to sign Sandro Tonali for a pretty good price from AC Milan, let's not forget, when that opportunity arises, I think you take that opportunity. And I think it gives you more balance. And here's another point. Bruno Guimaraes needs to play better, because he's been terrible to start this season. He was actively involved in giving away the second goal against Liverpool. And in this game, they need more from him, because this is why I said they needed the profile of a Sergio Canales, because Guimaraes is their only... When you look at Newcastle, how many footballers would you say they have in the team? I would say they have Bruno Guimaraes as a footballer. Mm-hmm. They have maybe Fabian Schär can fit into the footballer category, because I think what he does on the ball is excellent, but maybe what he does off the ball leaves a tiny little bit to be desired, although I think he's been very good. And probably Kieran Trippier. There's the 3 footballers. The rest for me... No, I would say the rest of that Newcastle team are athletes. Tonali's not a bad footballer, but he's not a pure footballer for me. Mm-hmm. He's more of a box-to-box, a destroyer, a ball-winning midfielder, that type of profile, I think. The forward players, Isak's not a footballer. Almiron's not particularly a footballer. They're more dynamic, quick-twitch players. Gordon maybe is a little closer, but again, he's dynamic as well. So So I think just adding one more footballer for a game like this, a game where you need to create a little bit more, maybe as relief to Bruno Guimaraes, to offer that sort of just something to break down teams, something to worry teams a little bit more, something to deliver the ball forward to Isak, Callum Wilson, Harvey Barnes with a bit more precision. I think maybe just at least having that option. And I know Sergio Canales is gone now. He's gone to Mexico. The fact that he went to Mexico suggests that Newcastle might have had a chance if they wanted to come in for him. The other two off the top of my head that I would look at, because again, like the Gabriel question I asked for Arsenal, whenever I'm questioning sort of a squad's makeup or a particular player, I've always got to ask the question, who out there could you possibly get who could offer that? Obviously, they were touted for James Maddison. He went to Tottenham. He would have been a good one, especially looking at the way he started for Tottenham. But you know what that left? That left Tottenham having a surplus of that type of player because they still have Giovanni Lo Celso on their books. So maybe there's a little bit of a Tottenham off-cut in Gio Lo Celso, who I still think is a fantastic player. He got unlucky to get injured before the World Cup last season. Otherwise, I think he would have had a bigger part, or he would have had a big part in Argentina's. That's all ifs and buts. Who knows what happens there? But anyway, he was very good for Villarreal last season, but he's a little injury prone. Maybe that doesn't matter so much for Newcastle because I still think in the big games, you'd probably still play Joelinton over him. But it just gives you a different option. And like I say, when Guimaraes isn't playing well, a different avenue to get the ball forward. And the other one, who's a little bit of an off-cut as well, and a guy who we haven't talked about, but I thought, you know what? What happened to Brahim Diaz? Because he was obviously, I think it was a 2-year loan to Milan, and now he's back at Real Madrid. He hasn't sniffed, I don't know if he's injured, but he hasn't sniffed any sort of action for Real Madrid. So I'm just thinking, if I'm Newcastle, look, him and Tonali were big parts of that AC Milan midfield. So if I could possibly go and get a number 10 who could add a bit of creation and add a different profile, I know the transfer window's closed, so this is all a moot point, but maybe they would have been looking at that. Maybe they already blew a lot of the budget on Tonali, which, if that's the case, I'm not going to complain about it because that's a really good midfielder to sign. But overall, I'm not panicking for Newcastle. I still think the football's good enough. I still think that they'll be able to get their results against other teams in the league. They've had easily the toughest start to any team has had to play in the league. When you think it's Villa, it's Man City, it's Liverpool, and then it's Brighton. Like, not one easy game in all of them. The Liverpool loss was devastating for the way they lost it. But yeah, burning 3 losses on 3 points at this stage of the season, not ideal, but I still think they have enough. Well, we'll finish on the. It gives us. I don't know if you had anything to talk about Newcastle if you wanted to transition into what it will lead us to transition to.
Not really. Don't have much to add. Just that, yeah, they haven't had the best of starts, and maybe that Newcastle one, like, maybe there's a bit of a hangover going into this, like a bad hangover, not good hangover, going into this this Brighton game. Because had they have won against Liverpool, they probably don't get beat by Brighton. So
yeah, I could agree with that. That's why I said that result was devastating, and that's why you said that result was pretty devastating after the game as well, I think. Yeah. But when you talk about the bad start to the season, were you also including the Champions League draw for Newcastle?
I was like, they got the group of death, didn't they?
Oh, and talk about a group of death. PSG, Dortmund, AC Milan, Newcastle. What the hell is that? That, like, you look at the other groups and it's just like, where's the quality in these other groups? There's normally one good team in the other groups. And then you look at I think it's Group E. Oh, no, I think it's Group F. And it's just like, what the F? What the F? Why? Like, all of these teams could have been pot 1 for me. And they're all in the same group.
Well,
oi, oi, oi.
I think Newcastle were pot 4, right? So
yeah,
they were always going to get. There was always the potential there to get the bad group. And then what? AC Milan finished
They were pot 3, I think.
Yeah,
For the 7-time champions of Europe, pot 3, crazy.
yeah. And then Dortmund obviously
Even after a
finished second.
semi-final.
Yeah, so that would have been their coefficient probably to save them, because didn't they finish fourth in the league? Because it was Lazio second and Inter third. So that's probably why they were pot 3, because their coefficient. But yeah, it's Newcastle might. Man, the way things have started and with injuries,
Newcastle could get out of that group. They could get out of that group. It comes down to them versus Milan for me, those two legs. But maybe we're overlooking the fact that PSG could be in the mix to either get in or get out. Do you think PSG will be runaway winners of that group, or do you think they'll be closer to fighting it with the rest of them? I think Dortmund are easily my 4th place. I think, look, they have the potential to get out, and because obviously you have to go to the Westfalenstadion, which is obviously such a tough place to go, they have the potential to win their home games. But in terms of what they produce on the football pitch, they are easily the 4th best team in that group for me.
Yeah, I think that it all depends on, I guess, what PSG turns up and what Luis Enrique can get out of them. Because I think they've had a bit of a slow start. But
they looked good. I know it's Lyon, but they looked really good in the first half, and they got Mbappe back. And look, they could be dark horses for the whole thing, given how good their management is, given how good that defense is. And the midfield looks a lot better with Ugarte in there, and Zaire Emery's playing quite well as 18, 19-year-old.
Well,
Vitinha is Vitinha. He does what he does.
Let's get into your European corner rather than transition.
Well, I guess
into
talking about
League,
the Champions League.
I'm handing this over back to you as well.
Well, I say Dortmund are my 4th best team because, look, they looked all right for the first half an hour against Heidenheim, but they drew 2-2 at home with Heidenheim and let a 2-goal lead slip. Now, you can talk about the validity of the second penalty for Heidenheim or the second goal. The penalty that led to the second goal, I don't know, it was a bit dodgy. I don't think it should have been a penalty. But whenever I see a team that has Emre Can as its holding midfielder in 2023 who want to accomplish anything, I just think, no, not for me. I'm not a big Emre Can fan. I had to watch him at Liverpool, and he's a little bit reckless. There are ways you can hide him in the team, as Brendan Rodgers found by putting him as the 3rd centre-back, but I never love it. He's Dortmund captain now. I think that says it all. I don't think Dortmund are a particularly good side, and I think they'll have it on their hands to even finish in the top 4 in Germany, if I'm honest. So that's why I put them as the 4th best side. AC Milan have a shout to be the team that could run away with that group, honestly, because the way they've started
well, haven't they?
Sorry?
They've started off pretty well, haven't they?
Well, they just beat Roma on the Friday night. Yeah. A Roma team who were doing their typical Roma stuff, being very distracted by the referees, trying to play into that sort of game. Very obvious when you have Mourinho on the bench and you have Belotti leading the line. They did manage to get Tomori sent off in the game, which I thought was a farce. The referee was so weak in both those decisions. I think you could see, much like the Van Dijk incident, but when Tomori got sent off, I think you could see him mouth to the referee, "Fuck you." I don't know if he said that, but if he said that, you got to think he'll get extra games added to. It was 2 yellow cards, so it shouldn't be too bad a suspension. That's what still worries me about Milan, the defense. I don't think you lose too much by taking Tomori out and putting Kalulu in. I think they're pretty much the same player for me, nearly. But it all comes down to, I guess, Thiaw, who is the other centre-back. If he could go to the next level, if he can look as good as his physique suggests and become a real leader of that defence, then they'll have something there, because like we've already discussed, their goalkeeper's world class, their left back's world class, their left winger's world class. Christian Pulisic hit the ground running. Ruben Loftus-Cheek looks like a serviceable central midfielder in playing for Milan. I still don't love Krunic, but even he looks pretty good to start the season. So again, that's where I don't like Milan. I don't like them in their 2 centre-back and their holding midfield role. So what kind of foundation are they built on? I don't know. But in terms of going forward with the additions that they've made in the summer, and with that brilliant connection that they could get down the left-hand side with Theo Hernandez and Rafael Leao. And Rafael Leao scored another superb goal in this game. And I think come the end of the season, I think Rafael Leao should be pushing to be the best left winger in the world. And that, like I keep saying, is a stacked position. But given that Vinny has already suffered an injury and will be out for a month, it will depend how he comes back. Kvaratskhelia, obviously playing for Napoli. Maybe he doesn't get much of the limelight because, get this, in Serie A, first and second from last season played against each other. I could not find the full match anywhere. I don't know where they televised it. I don't know where they put it. But I could only watch highlights of Lazio going away to the Maradona and repeating their trick from last season and winning to kickstart their season and maybe hush me, a doubter, and say that, you know what, last season wasn't a fluke. We actually were the second best team in Serie A. We can now, maybe after our first 2 losses of the season, maybe we can pick things up and show you why we are. Again, they lost Sergej Milinkovic-Savic and they made a few additions, but I don't know if they're additions that suggest that they'll be in the thick of a title race with the 2 Milan clubs and even Napoli. From the highlights, they created more than enough to at least draw the game. But to be fair, Lazio created more than enough to win the game as well. So I think it's good that Lazio are back sort of before, I don't know about back, but they're back to winning a big game before their Champions League campaign. I think they got a group where they'll fancy their chances to get out of it. So maybe there's another good team. Maybe they're a good shout for 4th. At least by not losing this game, they've had a better start than Roma, at least, who I think have lost all 3 of their games to start the season, which is terrible. Atalanta got back to winning ways again, a match I couldn't watch. But Inter were the team, I think, who were the big standout from Serie A this weekend because I was able to watch their game against Fiorentina. And much in the vein of the Liverpool against Aston Villa game, every time you look up at the screen, it was Inter. It was a wave of Inter attack, just going forward and forward and forward after. And Lautaro started the season great. Barella's a great player. The wing-backs are so high. They're playing right up as wingers, DeMarco and Dumfries. And they're 2 of the better sort of wing-backs in the world, to be quite honest. So the only thing I don't like about Inter is obviously losing Skriniar, so they've lost their central centre-back. I don't love that. Acerbi hasn't played a game yet this season, but De Vrij has been doing well. I don't know how much of an upgrade Pavard is on Darmian, and who'd have thought I'd be saying that, but Darmian's been really good as the right centre-back. Bastoni, as I said before, I love. Jan Sommer's an able replacement for Andre Onana. But what I don't love is maybe the lack of a true holding midfielder for them as well, because I know they brought in Davy Klaassen just before the transfer window shut, and I guess for me that just signifies that they're doubling down on, we're playing 3 central midfielders with a back 5, and all 3 of those central midfielders are pretty much formally number 10s. When you think Mkhitaryan, Çalhanoğlu and Barella is the preferred central midfield starters, they're all number 10s really by trade. So I get that the tactic is good enough to allow you to do that, but in those bigger games, I'm probably going to want more protection for Acerbi if and when he's back, given the fact that that's not Milan Skriniar anymore. So I know that they had to play the second half of last season without Milan Skriniar pretty much out of choice, but I still think they're my favourites for the title. They look the best so far, even though Milan have looked really good themselves. It's those 2. They're the ones setting the pace in Serie A so far. Bayern were handed the group with Manchester United. They should roll that group because I think the other 2. There was no other. Yeah, go on. You're smirking. What do you want to say about that one?
The United fans, they were waiting
to watch Harry Kane.
Yeah, they finally get to watch Harry Kane in the Champions League at Old Trafford.
He's just not rolling out for your team, unfortunately, United fans. Yeah, Bayern. Like I said, on paper, Bayern for me are the strongest team in Europe.
Did you hear about what happened with Paulinho though? they almost got him.
Yeah, man.
That
Oh, I'm
sucks,
glad you
man.
brought that up. I was so disappointed.
But did
I
you
was
hear?
so
Did you hear the actual whole story though?
I didn't. The reason I heard was because Fulham didn't have a replacement.
Yeah, but
That was the
basically,
latest I got.
but he pretty much he went to Bayern. I think he completed 2 medicals, and then like
Yeah.
pretty much like with an hour or two left, Fulham pulled out. Yeah, because they couldn't get a replacement. But like everything was agreed. It's like, I think it's similar to that. Who was it? Was it Akinfenwa or someone like that? Like a couple of years ago, like he showed up. Like he said his goodbyes to all the fans. Like he showed up. I can't remember what team it was, but he showed up to the stadium, and then like as he was getting out of his car, he received a text from his agent. Oh, the deal fell through. After he said his goodbyes and everything, like
Yeah, crazy.
insane.
Yeah, no, look, that's
That would have been
this.
that would have made them, I think, the favourites at least on paper, but maybe not necessarily playing style, because like playing style, obviously City is there because of the way they
Yeah,
play, the chemistry and all that, and the way that it's already built up. But at least on paper, in terms of personnel, yeah, like that probably would have put them as the favourites to win the whole thing.
yeah. The big question mark is the goalkeeper. Um, I'm not ready to turn around what I've said in terms of Upamecano, but first 4 games of the season, all is quite all right. There's no big oopsies for
No,
Upamecano,
oops,
so
Makano.
maybe he's validating Tuchel's belief in him. But he's looked at least good. It helps when you're playing next to Kim Min Jae, who I think has just picked up where he left off for Napoli. He's still an absolute specimen and wins 90% of his challenges, which is a great foundation to build on. I'm a little unconvinced by right back as well, because they've obviously let Pavard go. I think they let Stanisic go as well, or did he get an injury? But I'm not
Not
sure
sure.
if he's still there. So
Uh,
we've said a lot of Mazraoui to start the season. He's good enough for the Bundesliga. I don't know about Champions League. That's a touch and go one for me. They did look, I will say, on the midfield point with João Paulinho. I'm of the belief, like Thomas Tuchel, and this has been a story I think over the summer, that he's wanted an out and out holding midfielder. Um, I'm of the belief that they probably kind of should get one, and that's I guess why they went in for João Paulinho. But when they were their dominant force in 2020 under Hansi Flick, they didn't really play with an out and out holding midfielder. It was Thiago and Kimmich and Goretzka. In fact, Kimmich was a
Goretzka,
right
yeah.
back. It was Thiago and Goretzka, and neither of them are holding midfielders really. So they were helped with a great defense, but they have a great defense again. So look, that might be a little bit of a blessing in disguise in terms of helping their style of play, because in this game against Mönchengladbach, it was Kimmich with both the assists for both the Bayern goals that led the turnaround, because they found themselves 1-0 down to Mönchengladbach away from home. So I think, although I love Kimmich at right back because he's truly one of the world's best right backs when he plays there, his creativity from holding midfield in terms of those dinked balls over the top, it might be some of the best in the world. So being able to keep playing him and keep playing Goretzka and not have to worry about putting João Paulinho in this team, I think. And to be fair, Conrad Lima is kind of in the João Paulinho mold. So when you want that option in there, I don't think João Paulinho is really good, and I've been touting his praises for a while, but Conrad Lima is also really good. So yeah, it might have been a little bit of an unnecessary signing there. So yeah, I think Bayern looked defensively. They looked pretty good against Mönchengladbach. They had to come from behind, like I said, and Harry Kane obviously doesn't get on the score sheet, but they win the game. It is a traditional derby or rivalry, so you could expect the game to go a bit wonky. So all in all, going away to Mönchengladbach and getting a win and looking, like I said, defensively solid. These are the Bayern are on the road to recovery with me under Tuchel, if they could continue this kind of performance. Spain, Atletico's game with Sevilla, which probably would have been the game that I would have looked at most closely, that got called off because of some thunderstorms in the area, I
Oh,
think,
like
before the
they're
game.
having mass flooding there.
Yeah, there you go. So that's why that would have got called off. what can I say? I feel like I've said this 3 weeks in a row now, but Jude Bellingham scores another goal for Real Madrid in the 95th minute to win the game at home against Getafe, who, again, Real Madrid had to come from behind in that game as well. Yeah, Real Madrid, again, probably the most impressive team in La Liga so far. But Barca managed to turn their game. I don't know if they were a goal down, but they won their game 2-1. Lewandowski, I think, scored from the spot again. So, look, Spain is not great, but I think we can have at least a 3-horse race for the title there. And honestly, no one is really catching my eye for fourth place. I think we're going to have a mishmash hodgepodge battling it out for fourth in La Liga. But the top three, the race between the top three should be pretty good this season. But yeah, not much to report apart from Jude Bellingham, absolutely. Like Kylian, who do they need? Kylian Mbappe? I don't know.
Yeah,
and I guess we should talk about PSG finally. But yeah, go on.
And you've frozen on me a little bit.
Am I back?
Oh, I can hear you, but your picture's frozen.
Oh, that's okay. You don't need to see me. But yeah, finally PSG this weekend. I think was kind of a reason why you could still say they're a dark horse for the Champions League, because I think their balance is really good. I think we touched on them already, but yeah, having Mbappe back in that team, but now they got the Kolo Muani signing over the line. They have good options up front. Their midfield, like we said, looks stronger. It's still not world class, but it just needs to be functional, because I think that defense is world class. I think Marquinhos, if he can have a revenge season for last season. They also added Milan Skriniar. I mean, in terms of defenses across Europe, not many better. Maybe only Bayern's I would put as better. Maybe not even Bayern's I would put as better. In fact, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put Bayern's as better, because if you ask me, who do you want? Do you want Donnarumma or do you want Neuer? Well, ideally I'd want Neuer, but I don't know what's happening with Neuer after his injury, and I don't know how he's going to come back. So, given those stats, I'd rather have Donnarumma. Would I rather have Marquinhos or Kim Min-jae? It's close, but I'd rather have Marquinhos for the pedigree. And if he has if he comes back this season to somewhat of what he is, then they have a great founder, maybe the best centre-back in the world, to be quite honest, with PSG. Would you rather have Skriniar or De Ligt/Upamecano? I'd rather have the certainty of Skriniar. And the fullbacks are wonderful Lucas Hernandez is wonderful for what Luis Enrique wants him to do, which is not rotate very much. That's perfect. He is an ideal left-sided centre-back. And Ashraf Hakimi, again, he scores a goal against Lyon. If he has a bit of a revenge season as well, because I don't think he was very good, but he's one of the best right-backs in the world. So, yeah, I don't think on paper, not even Manchester City, I wouldn't put any defence better than PSG. So, having said that,
better?
Well, the way they play, but not for the personnel. No.
Ruben Diaz, Guardiola, Walker, and then whoever comes in as that other centre-back, whether it's Stones, Akanji,
Ake. There's the problem for me. I just think PSG's makes more sense to me. And I'm still... Maybe I'll hold my breath until I pass out. But I'm waiting for someone to figure out what City are doing with these 4 centre-backs. I'm waiting for someone to crack the conundrum.
Guardiola he was a left-back at Dinamo, and then he transitioned.
He's a left-back again, really. Yeah. And he's really good at it.
He is, because that was his position. He started off there, and then he transitioned into a centre-back.
He's... Okay, all right. Well, City probably win 2 of those arguments, because Ruben Diaz would have to be in the team. And Guardiola, I would take over Lucas Hernandez as well.
Would you take?
So they're the 2.
Would you take Hakimi over Walker just because it's age difference now, or would you take a prime Walker over Hakimi? That's
so close. That's such a close one, and goalkeeper's a close one as well between Ederson and Donnarumma. I think
I'll take Ederson just because he's better with his feet. Donnarumma's a bit suspect with his feet.
He is, and that is a concern in a Luis Enrique team. But Donnarumma is, for me, a much better goalkeeper than Ederson. Yeah, the other two positions, though, the goalkeeper and the right back are really tough because they're so different as well, Hakimi and Walker.
Well, Walker's transitioned into more of a
He's a third
defensive.
centre back.
He's
Exactly.
transitioned to a more defensive player. Where when he was at Tottenham, he was like bombarding up that line.
Well, yeah, in terms of attacking, when you asked about a prime Walker, I'd still probably take a prime Hakimi actually because now we're asking who is better at going forward because they still need to defend, but who is better at going forward? For me, it's Hakimi when he's
But
playing
Walker's better defensively, so I think I'd take
He is,
Walker in all
yeah.
honesty.
No, that's fair. And how could you not take? I guess how could you not take that Manchester City defense when they're doing what they're doing? But I don't know. PSG are at least there's at least a conversation to be had. I think we could agree on that in terms of personnel and what they have. So yeah, I can't rule them out as being a dark horse for the whole thing. And they might be a bit of a forgotten team after the Messi and Neymar experiment sort of backfired. And maybe that's exactly what they need this season.
Oh, you know how your camera's frozen? Like, it's actually frozen at a pretty good moment where, like, you're sort of, like, looking into the distance, sort of thinking. But, like, it reminds you of, you know how, like, when they have, especially back in the day before, like, before video calling was, like, a thing, they'd have, like, the interviews on TV or whatnot, but people would call in. Like the celebrities or whatever would call in, and then they'd put their picture up, so it would just be a still image. It's very much like that. It's like the old school interviews. If you don't have anything else to add, I just want to go through the groups of the Champions League quickly, and we'll finish up on that. But like, I'm basically just looking at them, and this is probably like, there's obviously that one group of death. But other than that, like, all the groups are just like, they just seem like this is probably the year where like the groups just seem the easiest that I've seen them for the last couple of years. Because at least like going back, there was like one clear group of death, and then there was like two or three groups where it's like, oh, this one could be a little bit tricky, you know. But this is just like.
No, that's why I didn't want to spend too long on it. That's why I only focused on the group of death.
Because, like, for instance, like Bayern, Man United, Copenhagen, Galatasaray. Like, Galatasaray could prove a little bit of a hostile ground to go to. So, like, they could throw up some sort of
and given
surprise.
United's inexperience in this competition under Ten Hag, I think there could be teething problems. So look, I expect United to get out, but I wouldn't be shocked if they finish third.
Yeah, but then like Group B is then Sevilla, Arsenal, PSV, Lens, and Lens they look a little bit weakened this year as well. Then Group C, but like even in that group, like Sevilla, aren't they like winless? They've lost all their games in La Liga.
Yeah, well, they're bottom. They're bottom of La Liga. So
exactly. So like,
stop me if you've heard this one before. But Sevilla will finish third in the group because that is the avenue back to the Europa League.
Pretty much. But then Group C, Napoli, Real Madrid, Braga, Union. So you got like Union Berlin. So you got two clear favorites for that group.
Union, I forgot to mention them in the Bundesliga wrap, and I haven't watched any of them because I'm struggling to watch the games. But Leverkusen are top over there. I wish I could have watched them. But Union have made some good signings.
Stanisic went to Leverkusen, by the way. On loan.
Union, we mustn't forget, and I brought this up last season, that their trajectory is upwards. So the next step is probably a second place finish, and honestly, I wouldn't put it past them finishing second in the Bundesliga. So the fact that they're, for me, good enough to even say that, I think they'll. Who were the other teams at that? It was Napoli, Real, and
Braga.
The only problem is Union are playing at the Olympiastadion rather than at home.
Yeah, I heard about that.
To get the extra revenue.
Yeah,
it's a fair decision because I think they sold like 50,000 like mini season tickets for the Champions League games, which is I think over double their stadium. So
yeah, I think
kind of makes sense.
Their actual home stadium is like in the forest or some shit like that. Like
that would have been awesome.
It's like 20,000.
But I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
But then, that group, you have two clear favorites. And then, Group D, you have Benfica, Inter, RB Salzburg, Real Sociedad. It's
That's a decent one. I think
it's a decent one, but you still have... I still think Benfica and Inter should be the clear top two in that.
I wouldn't say Benfica are all that much better than Sociedad.
Yeah, Sociedad could challenge for second, I guess. But I think Inter's finishing first in that group.
Inter will be very disappointed if they're even in a fight to get out of that group.
Yeah.
They should get out of it.
And then you have Group E, Feyenoord, Atletico Madrid, Lazio, Celtic.
That's yeah, no, I think Lazio should fancy their chances to get out of that group.
Yeah, that should be clear. I know, if they can start to turn things, especially after this Napoli win, if they can start to get on a bit of a roll, they should be clear to get out of that group. Group F is obviously the group of death with PSG, Dortmund, Milan, Newcastle. Which we've already talked about. So every game there is a must win. Pretty much.
So good.
Yeah. Group G is City, RB Leipzig, Crvena Zvezda, and Young Boys. So it's two clear favourites.
What a surprise! City got another easy Champions League group.
Yeah.
Oh, shocker.
Well, Arsenal got an easy group on paper
as well.
Yeah,
they got an easy one as well.
Group H, Barca, Porto, Shakhtar Donetsk, Antwerp. And Shakhtar used to be a bit of a dark horse in this competition, at least to get to maybe the quarterfinals. But now that everything's happening in Ukraine and everything, they're not playing at home. So it's clear Porto and Barca there.
Maybe Mudryk should get loaned back to Shakhtar just so he could spice up the group a little bit. If he could reclaim some of that Shakhtar form.
Oh, he needs it. But yeah, out of all those groups, they're all... This is probably the worst groups that I've seen for a while, where there's not at least a second or third group where he's oh yeah, there's some pretty interesting games. Group C is Napoli, Real Madrid, but that's only between them two. There's no third team really. Maybe Union Berlin there, just because of the story. But this is their first year in the Champions League. You don't know how it's going to go. So other than that, there's no second or third group that really brings up any tasty fixtures. Maybe Bayern United, but again, that's only two teams out of four. There's no third team there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Pretty poor draw. Except for one, probably I can't remember seeing a stronger group than Group F, to be quite honest.
Well, the only one that's
crazy one.
Last year, you had Barca, Inter, and Bayern, but that's only 3 out of 4. This is 4 out of 4.
Yeah, you still had the cannon fodder, didn't you?
You still had one team.
Who was it? It was Slavia Prague, I think, with the lambs to the slaughter for that one.
I'm just trying to look if there's any other combinations to make a second group of death, because I think the way that they've ranked them was based on their seeding. I don't think so. I don't think there would have been another way to create a second interesting group or a third interesting group. But yeah,
Newcastle and Sociedad were always going to be the tougher pot 4 teams.
Yeah. And Sociedad won 5-1 or 5-2, so they finally got their goal scoring boots on this weekend.
Yeah, they're a tricky one to call. Yeah. They need to spread those goals out a little bit more.
Anything else to add before we wrap it up?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Still Picture. Yeah. So to our audience, I know we said we're gonna go shorter on the pods and whatnot, but yeah, I'm gonna. If you want to watch the long form, watch this one. If you want to watch shorter clips, even though the United Arsenal breakdown will be 40 minutes, at least the other ones will be shorter. But yeah, to everyone that has tuned in and so far, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And thanks for coming. And bye for now.